美国时事通，我是罗文。
Angry Democrats throwing a hissy fit after Elon Musk dropped the Doge hammer on the Hunter Biden of government agencies. It's called USAID. And earlier, staffers got locked out of their headquarters in Washington as it gets rolled over into the State Department. The agency is supposed to oversee humanitarian development and security programs in some 120 countries and is in charge of over $70 billion of your taxpayer money. But the Trump administration argues it has become a clown car of corruption. And Musk sums it up this way, quote, USAID is a criminal organization.
This is a constitutional crisis that we are in today.
Just like Elon Musk did not create USAID, he doesn't have the power to destroy it. And who's going to stop him? We are.
This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like.
Karen. I don't know the answer to that question, but like I told Caitlin, I can get back to you guys on that.
And do you know what expertise he has in the areas of global health or humanitarian aid to be able to assess what's happening at USAID?
Well, first of all, Elon Musk is a once-in-a-generation business leader. He is an entrepreneur. He serves as a great ally and a friend to the president. And I think Elon Musk also has a little bit of common sense. And I think the American people really appreciate that when it comes to the federal government, because it seems like all common sense has been lost in this city. And that's what you see when you look at USAID. I know Secretary Rubio made some comments about how he will be acting as the director over that agency. And here's the reason why Elon Musk and others have been taking a look. Because if you look at the waste and abuse that has run through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap, and I know the American people don't either, and that's exactly what Elon Musk has been tasked by President Trump to do, to get the fraud, waste, and abuse out of our federal government.
You're now the head of USAID. The head of Doge, Elon Musk, called USAID a criminal organization and added that it is time for it to die. Do you agree with that?
They have basically evolved into an agency that believes that they're not even a U.S. government agency. That they are a global charity, that they take the taxpayer money and they spend it as a global charity, irrespective of whether it is in the national interest or not in the national interest. One of the most common complaints you will get if you go to embassies around the world from State Department officials and ambassadors and the like is USAID is not only not cooperative, they undermine the work that we're doing in that country. They are supporting programs that upset the host government for whom we're trying to work with on a broader scale and so forth. So they're completely unresponsive. They just don't consider that they work for the U.S. They just think they're a global entity and that their master is the globe and not the United States. And that's not what the statute says, and that's not sustainable.
Can it be reformed, or does it need to die?
Well, that was always the goal, was to reform it. But now we have rank insubordination. Now we have basically an active effort where their basic attitude is we don't work for anyone. We work for ourselves. No agency of government can tell us what to do. So the president made me the acting administrator. I've delegated that power to someone who's there full time, and we're going to go through the same process at USAID as we're going through now at the State Department. I think there are some, this is not about getting rid of foreign aid. There are things that we do through USAID that we should continue to do that makes sense. And we'll have to decide, is that better through the State Department or is that better through something, a reformed USAID? That's the process we're working through. There are things that are happening at USAID that we should not be involved in funding or that we have a lot of questions about. But they're completely uncooperative. So we had no choice but to take dramatic steps to bring this thing under control.
Do you think that,
Brother Benz, why is it a bad thing to have something like the USA that sounds on the surface of it? You just saw the big crocodile tears they're crying on MSNBC. It's for humanitarian projects. It's for development projects. It's to help bring water to the village. And that's a pretty good cover Why is USA? Why do we rip the mask off and say it's a CIA? And what is the advantage to the American people? You mentioned they gave the money to the same sort of folks throughout the world. Who are those folks, and why is it an advantage to the populist nationalist movement and the American working man and woman to basically rip the mask off, face what it is, and then shut it down, sir?
Well, this is a very, very complicated question, and I really hope that Trump World foreign policy folks understand the open heart surgery they're conducting on the way our foreign policy operates around the world. And in terms of why it's a bad thing that USAID does what it does, this is one of these questions that, you know, I've known and followed this stuff for many years, but I never made a crusade about taking it on until USAID got in the business of censoring the internet. And at that point, and censoring Americans on the American internet and censoring American social media companies as a foreign-facing humanitarian NGO sponsor, you know, that everyone knows is just the CIA's plausible deniability layer and funding conduit. But when it started to be used against Americans on American soil, that to me was the final straw. That no matter how useful it may be to spend $40 billion a year bribing warlords in Africa, bribing oligarchs in Ukraine, bribing and recruiting terrorists in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Syria, you know, disguising medical supply vans, you know, in Venezuela with boxes of AK-47s and military supplies. The fact is it is no longer a foreign policy instrument. It is a domestic control instrument, and that is the final straw. You can't do that to Americans.
Do you have any evidence in all your research, because you're like the axe in the space, that it's actually been used domestically against Americans, not just for doing warlord stuff like that, but actually against Americans?
Oh my God, yes. The USAID in 2021, they made a formal policy pivot to stopping disinformation on the internet, and they targeted U.S. technology companies. They targeted Facebook. They targeted Twitter 1.0. They targeted YouTube. They targeted all of the online information space. They were working with NewsGuard and Global Disinformation Index, and they were partnered with the State Department's Democracy, Rights, and Labor. They have which works with USAID's group called the Democracy, Human Rights, and Rule of Law. I'm sorry, Democracy, Governance, and Rights Bureau. And what they did is, under the banner of democracy promotion. See, this is the thing. They're supposed to be a democracy promotion organization. It's one of the reasons that they are accountable to the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They said that mis and disinformation.
I know you got to bounce, but I just want to hold you through a short break and for a minute or two afterwards. I just want to make sure when we leave this today, people understand that you've made the case of why this place is dangerous and not some humanitarian thing, giving out money to like the nuns to save the orphans in sub-Saharan Africa. Short commercial has been on this idea about a government, an administrative state and deep state that's been out of control. Ben's has been on this for years. So, Ben's, when they actually start to allocate money to domestic programs and to all the misinformation, shutting down free speech on the internet, like against War Room U, everybody, that money's allocated. We had this audience sat through the appropriations, the individual bills appropriations, and Eli Crane and Matt Gaetz making this case, I think back in the summer of 2024, 23 and 24, for two different authorizations bills. That time, less than 50% of the Republicans backed them. These things didn't pass in these subcommittees. Was anybody overseeing this? Did people on Capitol Hill know that they had started to use this to target American citizens, sir?
Well, let me clarify that, because there's a distinction here, which is that USAID does work that has dramatic impact on our domestic politics and domestic American-to-American affairs, but they funnel it through international organizations that operate on U.S. soil, rather than for the most part directly with U.S. organizations, although they do. For example, the USAID partner with the American Bar Association for, and these type of things. But for example, the USAID gave $27 million to the fiscal sponsor of the Soros prosecutor control group. That, everyone here, you talk about Soros prosecutors and Soros funds these prosecutors, and then Soros funded NGOs, in particular this main one called Fair and Just Prosecutions, this group that tells Soros prosecutors what to do. Well, that group got more from USAID than it did from George Soros. It got its fiscal sponsor did $27 million to the Tide Center, which also played a major role in fomenting Black Lives Matter, as one of the main parent groups to the Black Lives Matter groups. You have to understand, USAID is at the dead center. It occupies the center space between the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA. It's a switch player that serves as a plausibly deniable assistance agency to the rogue activities of those three federal agencies, and it represents essentially the sum consensus of the foreign policy establishment, the legacy foreign policy establishment that hated Trump with a passion, wanted to take him down because of his foreign policy views and because of his economic nationalism here at home. And what USAID declared doctrinally is that populism is an attack on democracy. They say this openly in USAID meetings. They say this openly in USAID documents. I published this a year and a half ago. The USAID Disinformation Primer published the first month of Biden's term in office, saying that the purpose of their disinformation programs was to eliminate populist subject matter expertise on the internet, because populist news sites undermine USAID programming by undermining public faith and confidence in democratic institutions. Because, don't you know, USAID spends billions of dollars to control the media every year. All the major media outlets in Ukraine are funded by USAID, like the Kiev Independent. All of the major news outlets in Western Hemisphere or in many parts of Africa and Central Asia, it does what the CIA used to do. Everyone remembers Operation Mockingbird. Well, guess what? That's just called USAID Media Sustainability and Media Assistance. Okay, that's all that is. And when populist waves swept the world in the U.S. in 2016 with Trump, and with what happened all over Europe with Marine Le Pen and Matteo Salvini and Nigel Farage, USAID declared censorship holy war against every single populist group, including Bolsonaro. Steve, I'm telling you right now, if USAID did not exist, Bolsonaro would still be the president of Brazil, and Brazil would still have a free and open internet. It was USAID that spent tens of millions of dollars of American taxpayer money funding the push to get anti-misinformation bills passed in the parliament there, funding the legal advocates who pushed the censorship court there, the TSE, to crack down on Bolsonaro tweets and WhatsApp and Telegram messages. They built a censorship octopus in Brazil, and it was built entirely on USAID because USAID declared Bolsonaro a populist, Trump of the tropics, and then set up this operation to control the information ecosystem there. One of the USAID grantees even said on a public call that the purpose was to eliminate the international exchange of ideas between the Trump movement and the Bolsonaro movement. That's what USAID does. They kill domestic populism because it gets in the way of their foreign policy goals.